This story is titled, My Parents Secretly Charged $133,000 to my credit card for my sister's graduation trip. She turned my card into a souvenir and bragged about it. So, I froze the account and canceled their bookings. When she got back, a surprise was waiting for them. Hi, everyone! Before we dive in, a quick favor. If you enjoy content like this, please hit the subscribe button. It's free, supports the channel, and make sure you never miss out on amazing videos. Alright, let's get started. Alright, so this is probably going to sound like something straight out of one of those wild Reddit threads. But this is my life now. My name's Caleb. I'm 29, male, and if I had to sum up my role in the family, it's this: the responsible one. You know, the guy who gets stuck fixing things when everyone else screws up. But what happened recently? This was on another level. Let me back up a bit. I've got a younger sister, Madison, who's 23 and just graduated college. She's smart, driven, and honestly, I've always been proud of her. We don't have the closest sibling relationship, but I try to be supportive where I can. Like for graduation, I got her this laptop she'd been hinting at for months. It wasn't cheap, but I figured it was a thoughtful gift. She loved it, and I felt like I'd done my part as the older brother. Growing up, our parents had a unique approach to raising us. And by unique, I mean wildly inconsistent. I was always the responsible one, the dependable child who worked hard and built a life on my own terms. By the time I was 23, I was already financially independent, working in finance and proud of the career I'd carved out for myself. Madison, on the other hand, has always been the baby of the family, pampered and adored. Don't get me wrong, I love my sister, but it was clear from the start that she was the favorite. She never had to work a part-time job or pitch in around the house. She always had the latest gadgets, the trendiest clothes, and the best of everything. Meanwhile, I focused on my own goals and tried not to bother with my parents' favoritism. Still, there were moments when it stung. Anyway, a few days after my sister's graduation, my mom called me. Now, my mom is, well, she's a character. She's not mean exactly, but she's the type of person who thinks she's always right and doesn't see a problem with steamrolling over everyone else's boundaries. If she wants something, she'll justify it in her head, no matter how ridiculous it might be. So, she calls, and right away, she's in full-on excitement mode. Caleb, you're not going to believe what we've done for Madison's graduation, she says, her voice practically vibrating with enthusiasm. I chuckled a little. What's the big surprise? I asked, expecting her to say they got her a nice piece of jewelry or maybe threw her a party. Well, she began, dragging out the word, we booked her a month-long trip to Europe. Isn't that amazing? I was genuinely surprised. Wow, that's a huge gift, I said. I didn't know you guys were planning something like that. Oh, it's going to be incredible, she said, clearly patting herself on the back. First-class flights, five-star hotels, private tours, nothing but the best for our girl. At this point, I was impressed. I mean, my parents aren't exactly wealthy. They've always been comfortable enough, but a trip like that? It sounded like something they'd been saving for a long time. Then my mom added, and of course we used your credit card to book it all. I froze. Wait, my credit card? Yes, she said, her tone completely casual, like she'd just told me she borrowed a cup of sugar. Mom, I said, why would you use my card without asking me first? Oh, don't be so dramatic, she said, brushing me off like I was overreacting. We needed the points for upgrades, and we know you're doing well financially. You can handle it. At this point, my heart was racing. How much are we even talking about here? She hesitated for maybe half a second before saying, it's about $133,000. I felt like the floor dropped out from under me. $133,000! I said, my voice rising. Yes, Caleb, she said, sounding annoyed now. It's for your sister's graduation. It's a once-in-a-lifetime trip. You should be happy for her. Mom, I said, trying to rein in my growing anger. That's an insane amount of money, and you didn't even ask me. Do you realize how serious this is? Oh, stop it, she snapped. You're being ridiculous. We'll pay you back. You act like we committed some crime. Because this is basically theft, I shot back. You used my card without permission. That's illegal. Don't be so dramatic, she repeated. We're family, Caleb. Family helps each other out. You've always been such a jerk, you know that? Why can't you just do something nice for once without making a big deal about it? That hit a nerve. A jerk? I said, incredulous. You think I'm a jerk for being upset that you maxed out my credit card without asking? I got Madison a laptop, Mom. A nice one. That was my graduation gift to her. This trip is not my responsibility. Oh, please, she said, now fully exasperated. That laptop was fine, but this is her graduation. It's a milestone. Don't you want her to have something to remember it by? Sure, I said, my voice tight, but I don't see why that means I have to foot the bill for something I didn't even agree to. My mom sighed heavily, like I was the unreasonable one. We'll pay you back, Caleb. Stop making such a fuss. You have a good job, don't you? What's the problem? The problem, I said, is that you spent $133,000 on my card without my permission. That's not a small mistake. That's huge. You could have at least asked me first. Well, if we'd asked you, you would have said no, she said, like that was a valid excuse. Exactly, I said, because it's not your money to spend. Ugh, you're impossible, she snapped. We raised you, Caleb. We gave you everything. The least you can do is help your sister celebrate her achievements. I don't understand why you're being so stingy about this. At that point, I was too angry to keep arguing. We'll have to revisit this another time, I said, trying to keep my temper in check. Oh, whatever, she snapped, her tone dripping with finality. But honestly, Caleb, we're leaving soon. I don't see how there's going to be any time to talk about it. I hung up without saying anything else because I needed a moment to process what had just happened. I pulled up my credit card account, and sure enough, every charge was right there in black and white. Flights, hotels, tours, and more. $133,000 of my money, gone in an instant. I kept trying to remember how the hell Madison and my parents ended up with my credit card in the first place. A few weeks ago, Madison mentioned needing to book something for a school trip. My parents vouched for her, saying she'd pay me back quickly, so I handed her the card to make the payment. At the time, I didn't think twice about it. She was my sister, after all, and she'd always returned things before. What I didn't realize was that she never gave it back. I hadn't even noticed it was missing until now, and it was obvious she'd decided to keep it for her own use. Now, I keep thinking about how they'd done this so casually, without a second thought. How they'd assumed I'd just go along with it. No questions asked. How they'd completely dismissed my feelings and acted like I was the problem. But I know one thing for sure. I can't let this slide. Not this time. Something has to change, and I am going to make sure it did. I'll keep you all posted. Update 1. Hey everyone. I didn't expect to write an update so soon, but things have escalated in ways I didn't think were possible. So, here I am again, typing this out while still trying to process the insanity that's become my life. Anyway, after that initial call with my mom, I was in this weird state of disbelief and anger. Part of me thought, okay, maybe Madison doesn't even know this trip was charged to me. I mean, my mom has always been the one who calls the shots, and Madison's never had to worry about money before. I wanted to give her the benefit of the doubt. I checked her Instagram, and my blood boiled the moment I saw her posts. She wasn't just on the trip, she was thriving on it. Pictures of scenic views, luxury hotel rooms, and lavish meals weren't just ideas. They were her reality. Madison and my parents had already taken off, indulging in their extravagant European tour without a care in the world, all funded by my money. The sheer audacity made my stomach churn. They hadn't even bothered to resolve things with me first. No apologies, no explanations, just a blatant dismissal of everything I'd said. They acted like it was their right to spend my money. Like I didn't even exist beyond being their personal bank, literally. Then Madison had the nerve to send me a text. At first, it seemed innocent enough. She sent a string of pictures from her trip. Scenic views, fancy hotel rooms, and artfully plated meals. My jaw clenched tighter with every photo. She wasn't just enjoying herself. She was reveling in the life she was living on my dime, without my consent. It wasn't just thoughtless, it was disrespectful. And then came the final straw. Madison sent one more picture, a close-up shot of her suitcase. Attached to it, in plain view, was a luggage tag she'd made out of my credit card. The caption? Carrying your contribution with me everywhere. I stared at the photo, my hands shaking with fury. It was a slap in the face. She'd turned my money, stolen without my permission, into some kind of sick trophy. It wasn't enough that they'd betrayed me. The gall of it left me speechless, too. This wasn't carelessness. This was pure entitlement, and I was done letting them walk all over me. I stared at the picture, trying to figure out if this was some kind of sick joke. I mean, who does that? Who turns a credit card they know they weren't supposed to use into a souvenir? I texted back immediately. What the hell is that supposed to mean? Madison replied with a laughing emoji. Relax, Caleb, it's funny. You've been working so hard, I figured you'd want to be part of the trip in some way. Part of the trip? As if I wasn't already funding the entire thing. I told her straight up, Madison, this isn't funny. Do you even realize how much this trip cost me? $133,000. That's years of hard work, savings, and financial planning down the drain. Her response? OMG, you're so dramatic. Mom said she'd pay you back. Why are you acting like this is a big deal? You're doing fine financially, right? I felt like I was having an out-of-body experience. It was like talking to someone who lived on a completely different planet. I tried explaining, again, how this wasn't just about the money. It was about the fact that they'd done this without asking, maxed out my credit card, and left me with a huge financial mess to deal with. Her reply? Well, maybe if you weren't so uptight, you'd understand how much this trip means to me. You should be happy for me. Stop being such a buzzkill. At that point, I realized reasoning with Madison wasn't going to get me anywhere. She seemed completely oblivious to the seriousness of what was happening, and my mom wasn't exactly stepping up to take responsibility either. I needed to take real action to try and get my finances under control before this whole thing spiraled even further. So, I decided to call the credit card company and dispute the charges. I figured it would be a straightforward process. I hadn't authorized any of this, and surely that would be enough to get the ball rolling. Little did I know, this decision would escalate things in ways I couldn't have predicted. When I got on the phone with the credit card company, I explained the situation as calmly as I could. My parents had used my card without my permission to fund an extravagant trip for my sister, and I needed the charges reversed. I didn't even try to sugarcoat it. This wasn't just a misunderstanding, this was outright misuse of my financial information. At first, the rep seemed sympathetic. I'm so sorry to hear this happened, she said. Let me pull up the charges and see what we can do. I waited, hopeful that this might actually be a simple fix. But after a few minutes of typing on her end, she came back with something I wasn't expecting. So, I've reviewed the account, she said. And while I completely understand your frustration, these charges don't technically qualify as fraud. Oh, what? I said, completely thrown off. How is this not fraud? I didn't authorize any of these purchases. Well, she said carefully, it looks like the card information was used by someone you willingly shared it with. According to our policy, that doesn't meet the criteria for fraud. Now the thing is, my parents had my card details, because years ago, I'd shared them with them for emergencies, like unexpected bills or urgent medical expenses. I'd trusted them completely, never imagining they'd take advantage of it. But now I realize that, on top of Madison using the physical card, my parents had also felt entitled to use my card information for bookings and upgrades. This wasn't just a one-time mistake, it was a coordinated betrayal by the people I thought I could trust the most. I asked, so, because I gave my parents my card information, they're allowed to max it out without asking? And there's nothing you can do about it? She hesitated. Unfortunately, since you shared the information willingly, we can't classify the charges as unauthorized. Have you spoken with your parents about reimbursing you? I wanted to scream. Of course, I've spoken with them. They think it's no big deal. That's why I'm calling you, because I need help getting this resolved. I understand, she said, her voice still annoyingly calm. If you'd like, I can transfer you to our billing department to discuss a payment plan for the outstanding balance. A payment plan for $133,000 that I never even spent. I felt like I was living in some kind of nightmare. No, I said, barely keeping my frustration in check. I'm not interested in a payment plan. I'm interested in getting these charges reversed. I'm really sorry, she said, but under the circumstances, there's nothing more we can do on our end. If you'd like, I can file a report to document the situation, but it won't change the status of the charges. I ended the call feeling completely defeated. I thought calling the credit card company would at least give me some leverage or a way to start fixing this mess, but instead, I was stuck with a maxed out card and no real options. At this point, I am at a loss. My trust in my family is completely shattered, and I have no idea what to do next. So I'm asking for your advice here. What do you think I should do? When I sort some things out, I'll come back with an update. Update 2. All right, here's the latest update in this ongoing mess. If you've been following, you know my parents used my credit card, without my permission, to fund my sister Madison's $133,000 European graduation trip. When I called the credit card company to dispute the charges, they basically told me it wasn't fraud, because I'd willingly shared my card info with my parents in the past. So that avenue? Completely shut down. So, after hanging up from that call, I felt so cornered. Like every move I made to fix this was just hitting a wall. But then it hit me while reading your comments. Just because the credit card company couldn't help didn't mean I was out of options. If the charges were made without my consent, then the companies my parents booked with didn't have my consent either. That's when I realized what I had to do. I couldn't go through the card company, but I could go directly to the airlines, hotels, and tour operators. If I could prove the purchases weren't authorized, maybe I could at least throw a wrench into this ridiculous trip. So, I started with the airline. Madison, bless her Instagram-loving heart, had posted several selfies at the airport before leaving, complete with tags for the airline and her first-class seat number. I pulled up their customer service line and called. "Hi," I said, doing my best to sound calm and professional, even though I was anything but. "I need to report an issue with a ticket that was purchased using my credit card." The rep asked for some details, so I gave them the flight number, the date, and Madison's full name. "The problem," I continued, "is that this ticket was booked without my permission. The cardholder details on file are mine, but I didn't authorize this purchase." There was a pause on the other end as the rep pulled up the reservation. "Okay, I see the booking here," they said. "Can you confirm that this charge was made fraudulently?" "Technically, yes," I said. "It was made by a family member who used my card without my consent." "I see," they replied. "Unfortunately, since the ticket has already been issued and used for the outbound flight, we can't cancel the reservation outright. However, I can place a hold on the return ticket while this is investigated further." Bingo. "That's perfect," I said. They explained that the hold would prevent Madison from checking in for her return flight until the payment issue was resolved. They also flagged the reservation in their system, which meant she'd likely face additional scrutiny if she tried to make changes or upgrades. Then I moved on to the hotels. Madison had been tagging every luxury property she stayed at, which made my job surprisingly easy. I started with the most recent one, a 5-star resort she'd raved about in her stories. "I'm calling about a reservation that was booked under my credit card. I need to confirm some details," I said. The receptionist asked for the reservation number, which Madison had conveniently posted in a photo of her room key. Once they pulled it up, I explained the situation. My card had been used without my consent, and I needed to put a stop to any additional charges. "I understand," the receptionist said. "I can suspend incidentals for this room, which means the guest won't be able to charge anything to their stay. Would you like us to disable room service and minibar access as well?" "Yes, please," I said, trying not to sound too gleeful. After handling that hotel, I repeated the process for a few others Madison had tagged. Each call took time, but the outcome was the same. Incidentals disabled, services suspended, and reservations flagged for payment issues. Then I tackled the tours. Madison had been posting nonstop about these exclusive, once-in-a-lifetime experiences: private yacht rides, vineyard tours, hot air balloon trips, you name it. Most of them were with boutique operators that had direct booking lines. I called one of the yacht companies, claiming to be the cardholder who'd paid for the reservation. "There's been a mistake," I said. "I didn't authorize this charge, and I need to cancel the booking immediately." The person on the other end hesitated. "I see the reservation here, but it's for tomorrow. Are you sure you'd like to cancel? We won't be able to refund the payment at this time." "That's fine," I said. "Cancel it anyway." They agreed, and within minutes, Madison's luxury yacht experience was no more. By the time I finished, I'd managed to disrupt almost every major part of her trip. The return flight was on hold, hotel services were restricted, and several high-end tours had been outright canceled. I wasn't trying to ruin her life. I just wanted her, and my parents, to feel some of the consequences of what they'd done. It's not the perfect solution, but for the first time since this whole mess started, I felt like I was finally taking some control back. I know they're going to lose it when they find out, and they still have no idea what's waiting for them when they get back. I've got a surprise planned, and let's just say it's going to be unforgettable. That's it for now. I'll keep you all updated. Update 3. Hey everyone, here's the next update, and let me just say, things hit a level of chaos I didn't think was possible. So here goes. I didn't mention in my last post that I also froze the credit card account completely. I figured if they were so determined to spend my money without asking, the least I could do was make it a little harder for them. What I didn't fully realize at the time was how quickly this would unravel their entire trip. As the notifications about declined charges started rolling in, I felt a surge of satisfaction. For the first time in years, I wasn't just standing by while my family steamrolled over me. Madison had been relying on the card for every aspect of her trip: hotel incidentals, tours, transportation, even food. Without it, everything ground to a halt. So when she called screaming, "Caleb, what the hell is going on? The hotel says my card isn't working, and I can't check in anywhere. I'm stuck." I couldn't help but grin. She was finally getting a taste of the consequences she'd ignored for so long. But I kept my voice calm. "Madison, it's not your card. It's mine, and I froze the account because it was being used without my permission. She let out this frustrated groan. Are you kidding me? What am I supposed to do now? I can't even pay for food. Well, I said, maybe you should have thought about that before letting mom and dad charge this trip to my card without asking. She started ranting about how selfish I was, accusing me of ruining her once-in-a-lifetime experience. I told her this wasn't a conversation I was willing to have over the phone and hung up. Next, my mom called. And when I say she was livid, I mean she was screaming into the phone. Caleb, what is wrong with you? She shouted. You've stranded your sister in a foreign country. Do you even care about what you've done to her? I almost laughed. What I've done? Mom, you're the one who maxed out my credit card and left me with $133,000 in debt. This isn't my fault. Don't you dare try to turn this around on me, she yelled. You're her brother. You're supposed to support her, not sabotage her. I wasn't going to let her guilt trip me. You made this mess, not me. If Madison's stranded, that's on you. You should have thought about the consequences before deciding to steal from me. After that, she started sobbing and accusing me of tearing the family apart. I hung up before she could go any further. I figured that would be the end of it for the day. But a few hours later, my dad called. Unlike my mom and Madison, he wasn't yelling. He was doing that calm, disappointed dad voice, which honestly got into my nerves. Caleb, we need to talk about what you've done, he said. Funny, I replied. That's what I've been saying to you this whole time. This isn't the way to handle things, he said, ignoring my comment. You've stranded your sister in Europe. Do you know how much trouble you've caused her? And do you know how much trouble you caused me when you maxed out my credit card? I shot back. He let out this long sigh, like he was dealing with a stubborn child. Look, I understand you're upset, but this is family. You could have talked to us instead of escalating things like this. I did talk to you, I said, my frustration boiling over. I told you this wasn't okay, and you dismissed me. What did you expect me to do? Just roll over and let you ruin my finances? Caleb, he said, in that infuriatingly calm tone. You've made your point. Can you at least unfreeze the account so we can get Madison home? I didn't even hesitate. Figure it out yourselves. After that, I stopped answering their calls. I figured they'd find some way to sort things out, and I wasn't going to be their backup plan. Over the next few days, I started hearing about the chaos through extended family and acquaintances. Apparently, Madison had gone to the hotel desk to order room service, only to find out she couldn't charge anything to the room. They demanded payment up front for the stay, and when she couldn't provide a functioning credit card, they canceled her reservation altogether. She had to drag her luggage to a much cheaper, less glamorous hostel, one she could barely afford even after pooling cash with my parents. I also learned that my mom was furious, blaming everyone but herself. She reportedly spent hours calling relatives back home, begging for money to save Madison's trip. A few family members pitched in enough to keep them housed and fed, but all the luxury plans Madison had been bragging about, private yacht tours, fine dining experiences, vineyard excursions, were canceled. The worst part for them? Madison's return flight was flagged due to the payment issues I'd initiated. She wasn't allowed to confirm her seat until the matter was resolved. According to someone who was there, she tried to sweet-talk her way past the issue, but the airline staff weren't having it. They told her she'd need the cardholder, me, to call and sort it out. Madison reportedly broke down crying at the counter, and my mom went into full-on meltdown mode, yelling at the staff and demanding they fix it. They didn't, of course. Eventually, my parents cobbled together enough money to buy a cheap one-way ticket home for her. The whole process delayed their return by a few days, and from what I've heard, it was a nightmare. And while all this was happening, I filed a formal fraud report with the police. I had already provided the credit card company with all the evidence they needed, and they were investigating on their end. But I wanted to make sure there were real consequences for what they'd done, especially since they showed zero remorse. The police took the case seriously. I provided them with copies of text messages, screenshots of Madison's social media posts bragging about the trip, and detailed invoices from the travel bookings. They told me that once my family returned, they'd likely be called in for questioning. At this point, I'm just waiting to see their reaction when they eventually get back. And one thing's for sure, I'm done letting them walk all over me. I'll keep you posted. Final update. Hey everyone, here's the update you've been waiting for. And trust me, it's a wild one. When my parents and Madison finally got back from their disastrous trip, they didn't get the homecoming they expected. Instead, they were greeted at the airport by the police. I told you in the last update that I had filed a fraud report while they were still overseas. It wasn't a decision I made lightly, but after everything they'd done, I knew I had to take action. The investigation took some time, but by the time they landed back in the country, law enforcement was ready to have a word with them. According to a buddy of mine who I sent to the airport to observe what happened, the scene was complete chaos. The police were stationed at the gate, and as soon as my family stepped out of customs, they were intercepted and pulled aside for questioning. Madison, true to form, broke into tears almost immediately, loudly proclaiming that she was the victim of her vindictive brother. My mom, on the other hand, went straight into defense mode, arguing with the officers and insisting it was all a misunderstanding. She even tried to play the family card, claiming that family matters shouldn't involve the law, as if that would magically erase the fraud they had committed. It didn't work. The police had all the evidence they needed: screenshots of texts, Madison's Instagram posts bragging about the trip, and the flagged charges on my credit card. They explained that this wasn't just a family dispute. It was fraud, plain and simple. My parents were livid, claiming they were being unfairly targeted, but the officers made it clear they'd need to come in for a formal statement. My dad, as usual, tried to play the calm, reasonable one. He reportedly told the officers that I was overreacting, and that this was just a family misunderstanding blown out of proportion. The police didn't buy it. They let them go home for now, but informed them they'd be contacted soon for further questioning. After hearing all this, I expected them to lay low and maybe, just maybe, take some accountability. But no. Instead, they showed up at my house the very next day, demanding that I apologize. It started with pounding on my door loud enough to wake the neighbors. When I opened it, there they were. My mom, red-faced and clutching the invoice I'd sent them. My dad, looking stern and self-righteous. And Madison, glaring at me like I was the worst person in the world. Before I could even say anything, my mom stormed inside, followed by the other two. "What is this?" she shouted, waving the invoice in my face. "Is this your idea of a joke?" "It's an accurate summary of everything you spent on my credit card," I said evenly. "I thought it was only fair for you to see the total damage." "You're unbelievable," she snapped. "You humiliated us, ruined Madison's trip, and now you're trying to play the victim? You owe us an apology." I stared at her, stunned by the sheer audacity. An apology? For what? For stopping you from stealing more of my money? "You didn't have to handle it like this," my dad chimed in, his tone infuriatingly calm. "You could have talked to us instead of escalating things to the police." "I did talk to you," I said, my frustration boiling over. "And you dismissed me. You called me selfish and dramatic, like I had no right to be upset. So yeah, I escalated it, because clearly nothing else was going to get through to you." Madison finally spoke up. "You didn't just ruin the trip, Caleb. You embarrassed me. Do you know how humiliating it was to have my reservations canceled and to be treated like a criminal at the hotels?" I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was so absurd. Humiliating? Try being the one whose trust was shattered by his own family. Try being the one left with a $133,000 bill because his parents decided his money was theirs to spend. "Stop acting like the victim," my mom said, her voice shaking with anger. "We told you we'd pay you back." "With what money?" I asked, genuinely curious. "If you had the means to pay me back, you wouldn't have needed my card in the first place." "We're your family, Caleb," she shouted. "Family helps each other. That's what you're supposed to do." "No," I said firmly, standing up. "Family doesn't steal from each other. Family doesn't put each other in impossible situations and then play the victim when they're called out. What you did wasn't helping. It was betrayal. And now you're here demanding an apology from me? Unbelievable." The room went silent. They weren't expecting me to stand my ground like that, but I wasn't done. "I'm done letting you treat me like this," I continued. "I'm done being the responsible one who cleans up your messes while you all walk all over me. You've shown me exactly how little you respect me, and I'm not putting up with it anymore." My mom started to argue, but I cut her off. "This isn't a negotiation. We're done. I don't owe you anything. Not an apology, not forgiveness, nothing. Now, it's time for you to leave my house." My dad muttered something about how I was tearing the family apart. Madison rolled her eyes and stormed out, slamming the door behind her. My mom was the last to leave, muttering under her breath about how ungrateful I was. When the door finally closed, I felt a sense of freedom I hadn't experienced in years. For the first time, I wasn't sad or guilty about standing up for myself. I was relieved. Now, to answer the big question, how did I get my money back? Well, after freezing the account and flagging the charges, the credit card company launched an investigation. It wasn't easy. There were weeks of back and forth, and they initially tried to argue that it wasn't fraud, because I'd willingly shared my card details with my parents. But I didn't give up. I provided every piece of evidence I could: text messages, screenshots of Madison's posts, and a detailed comparison of the charges versus my usual spending habits. Eventually, they ruled in my favor and reversed every single charge. Seeing that zero balance felt like a huge weight had been lifted. Since then, I've changed all my passwords, opened a new credit card, and frozen my credit to make sure this never happens again. As for my family, they're dealing with the fallout of their actions. The fraud investigation is ongoing, and I have no plans to intervene. They made their choices, and now they have to live with the consequences. To everyone who's followed this chaos, thank you. Your support has been a lifeline. If you're dealing with something similar, remember, you don't owe anyone your peace of mind, not even family. For now, I'm focusing on myself, and honestly, life has never felt better.